two greatest shooting guards of basketball history, and although they sometimes appeared as mirror images of one another in terms of style, mentality, and personality, both individuals were actually much more different than the fans typically recognize. I've witnessed countless hours of both of these legends playing the game of basketball, and today, I'm breaking down every major difference that I could recognize in how the two approached and played the game. Obviously, this is just my own limited perspective, so let me know in the comments what are some differences that you've noticed. Number 1. Michael Jordan had much bigger hands. To people who don't know basketball on a deep level, this might initially seem like an insignificant detail, but it's actually quite the opposite. Phil Jackson has spoken in depth about the advantages Jordan had due to his monstrous hands, and even Jordan himself has elaborated on the edge it gave over the competition. Jordan's hands weren't just large for his stature, but he actually had some of the largest hands of any player of NBA history. With Jordan's massive mitts, he could easily palm and control the basketball, and he could use greater pump fakes and misdirect players more easily. It also allowed him to effortlessly alter and change his shot in midair, which would certainly be more difficult for players who had less control of the basketball due to their smaller hands. And obviously, in an era of hand checking, it made Jordan even more difficult defensively. In an interview in 2013, Kobe spoke about the difficulties of developing his game without that inherent advantage, saying, "Michael was blessed with massive hands, and Dr. J as well. I wasn't. I have big hands, but Jordan and Irving can literally pick up the ball like an orange. So I've had to do things to strengthen my hands, strengthen my forearms, to make sure that I have the grip to be able to do it. They obviously had the natural capabilities to do it. I had to work to get the strength to be able to do it." Number 2. Kobe was a harder worker. This is certainly a bold claim, and isn't meant as a slight to MJ, as he's certainly one of the hardest working basketball players that the game has ever seen. But on the other hand, Kobe has an argument for being the hardest working athlete of all time. As I mentioned in a previous video, the great Phil Jackson made this bold claim himself, which is quite stunning since he spent all of his coaching career with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Feel free to pause the video for more time to read Phil Jackson's full quote. As legendary as Kobe's drive was, I could even argue that it was sometimes a negative for Kobe, as he pushed himself so hard that it sometimes had lingering effects on his body. The Mamba was known to play through injury, play heavy minutes, put an insane amount of time into the gym, and apparently lived most of his basketball life on only 4 hours of sleep each night. With an insane work ethic like that, it's no wonder why he's one of the greatest players of all time. But then again, it also makes sense why he dealt with so many injuries throughout his career, considering the fact that he willingly put so much strain on his body. Number 3. Kobe was a better perimeter shooter. Numerous people have made the same conclusion, including Michael Jordan's longtime teammate Scottie Pippen. When you look at their three-point percentage next to one another, Kobe has a very slight advantage, and it's so close that you could basically call it a tie. But one of the key differences was the fact that Kobe had a much higher tendency of shooting three-pointers, as he shot more than 3 times as many as Jordan did over the course of his career. Some of that has to do with the surge in three-point attempts as the game has evolved, but even if you adjust for inflation, Kobe still had a higher tendency of three-point attempts. Analytics have proven that as you take more shots, percentages generally decrease, because you can be less selective with your opportunities, and yet despite that, the Mamba maintains his edge. The perimeter shot advantage isn't just about three-pointers though. Kobe loved to take shots in rhythm just a step or two inside of the three-point line. The Mamba was excellent at these shots, whether he was open or contested. With that being said, analytics show that generally these are the most inefficient shots on the court, mostly because of their distance and lower conversion rate, while still being worth only 2 points. Which brings us to the next difference. Number 4. Michael Jordan had better shot selection. It's no secret that Michael was a more efficient scorer than Kobe Bryant, averaging 30 points per game over the course of his career on nearly 50% shooting. A big reason for Jordan's significant edge over Kobe in field goal efficiency was because of MJ's sound decision making. Although Michael is famous for making some difficult shots, he certainly wasn't seeking them out. In his younger years, Jordan scored a large portion of his points in the paint and from the free throw line. As he aged, his game became more about the mid-range, and he rarely settled for more difficult opportunities, as he used his high basketball IQ to put himself in good positions to score. Although Kobe had many of these same skills as Jordan, the Mamba's supreme confidence led him to take a tremendous amount of difficult shots that most players wouldn't attempt. During his prime, it was common on a nightly basis for him to shoot through double teams, take heavily contested and off-balance shots from the perimeter, and he took a ton of what us hoopers would call heat check shots. Once again, Phil Jackson gave his own perspective on this topic, and said that Jordan always played within the flow of the team's offense and rarely tried to force anything, while Kobe may have been the more explosive player, but he also had a strong tendency of trying to force the situation and take over games offensively. Number 5. Jordan was the more durable athlete. I somewhat alluded to this earlier, but Kobe was dealing with injuries throughout the majority of his career and caused him to miss well over 100 games. Even in the games where he played, he was often dealing with nagging pain in his hands, wrists, shoulders, knees, and ankles. On the other hand, other than Jordan's second season with a broken foot, he rarely missed any games due to an injury and was often performing at full strength. In fact, excluding his second season, Jordan missed only 7 out of a possible 919 games with the Bulls. This was a testament to his stellar conditioning and his God-given athleticism. Number 6. Kobe was better with his left hand. It's not like there's any fancy left-handed specific stats that I can share with you guys, but you'll just have to take my word for it on this one. Now, Jordan has possibly the greatest layup package in NBA history, and a major aspect of that was his incredible ability to finish the play with his left hand. If that was the only aspect we were looking at, then this advantage would go to Jordan. But I'm pretty sure that Kobe still could have been a legit star even if he had to use his left hand as his dominant hand. The Mamba was working on his left-handed game from an extremely early age. When he broke his right hand, he showed up to Lakers practice and shot entirely with his left hand. And when he injured his right shoulder, he played a significant amount of a regular season game with only his left hand. And of course, many of us remember the ridiculous turnaround left-handed three against the Dallas Mavericks. If Kobe had to play a mid-range game as a left-handed shooter, he's one of the few stars who I believe could still be a successful scorer. Number 7. Michael Jordan had a greater vertical leap. Vertical leap comparisons are usually a sure way to get comment sections in heated debates, because it's hard to get credible and precise estimations of each player's leap. With that being said, most listings have Jordan's leap between 46 and 48 inches, while Kobe's is listed around only 38 inches. Even by just the eye test, it's not hard to see how Jordan could have such a tremendous vertical, considering his iconic and comfortably stylish free throw line dunks, and also how Jordan made his hang time famous by appearing to simply wait in the air for his defender to make his descent. Number 8. Michael Jordan is a more competitive person. Whether this is an advantage for MJ or a problem for MJ is really up to your interpretation. When it comes to their mentalities on the basketball court, both players were about as competitive, driven, and intense as a player could possibly be. But off the court is another story. In Kobe Bryant's own words, Michael Jordan was a more competitive person, from the standpoint that Jordan was competitive about more things. I don't think Kobe would have ever conceded that anyone cared more about the outcome of a basketball game than he did. But in an interview, Kobe explained that he's only extremely competitive about the things he cares about, while Jordan is competitive in absolutely everything. Kobe gave a funny example of a time the two athletes were out to dinner together and how Jordan would eat the food quickly just to finish his meal before Kobe did. There's many more differences between these two great basketball legends, but these were the biggest ones in my opinion. Let me know in the comments section